So this presentation is going to be a little bit different. I've done a number on different scouting topics, but people and I talk, that I go to shows with regularly, or just people who want to get into going to Trade-O-Rees. And I don't know who goes to the most Trade-O-Rees, or if there's anyone who's really an authority on going to Trade-O-Rees. But I go to a good number, so I can at least speak a little bit about the ones that I go to, and some of the ones that I don't go to. I go in a normal year, I probably go somewhere between 12 to 15 shows. 15 that doesn't happen a lot, but around a dozen, maybe one or two more. That's about how many I go to in a year. So I travel quite a bit for some of them. As I go through these, a couple things to keep in mind. One, obviously, there is a limit, and I'll talk about that some, where the distance to a show makes it hard for me, and I'm a dealer, so I'm doing this at least somewhat for the financial gain of doing it, of going to shows. So there is a point when you're traveling a long distance to where it's no longer viable for me to go. So there are a good number of these shows, especially on the West Coast and the Northwest, a little bit of the Northeast, all the way up there. I've been to some, I haven't been to others. Once you start going over 12 hours, you really have to start being a little picky and choosy on what shows you go to. So we'll go into that a little bit more in depth as we go through. The other thing I just want to say, when you're giving reviews on stuff, it doesn't help if you're not giving an honest review now. So there may be some criticisms a little bit as I go through. I just want you to know that that's constructive criticism. I want every show in the country to be the best show it can be, because I want everyone to have a great experience. I think it helps the hobby whenever there's a good show going on. So if I say something about your local show or a show you put on, please don't take it as really negatively. I really mean it, trying to be helpful, trying to tell you what my opinion is, so that maybe if it's shared by other people, maybe you can change it and improve the show. So just something to keep in mind. And some things can't really be changed. They just are how they are. So, okay. So we're going to start. I'm going to kind of go through the 2023 calendar, and then I'll just touch briefly on 2024 on some of the shows coming up, the ones that I'm really looking forward to. I think I counted, and in the next 6 months, I think I have 10. I'd love to do 11, but I have a conflict. So I think I'll do 10 shows in the next 6 months. And I'll just kind of touch briefly on the ones I'm most looking forward to. So first, starting off in January, you kind of have the spring and fall are Trade-O-Ree time. In the summer, there's not usually anything unless there's a big national show like a pre-NOAC. So most of them are going to be in the spring and the fall. So you start off with Dallas. Now, Dallas has historically been considered one of the largest national shows, and that's certainly true when it comes to OA. I don't think that there's another show in the country you can go to that has as much high-end OA when it comes to name and numbers. That being said, Dallas has gotten a lot smaller just in the times I've gone. Part of the problem for me going to Dallas, and this kind of shows you where the problem is going to a show that far away. For me, if I buy an airline ticket, I buy 2-3 nights in a hotel room, while I'm there, because usually go a day early. So a couple nights in a hotel room, food, drink while you're there. Without stepping in the door to the show, you're going to end up spending between $750 to $1,000, depending on where you're coming in from. So if you're going to spend that much money to go to the show, it has to be just absolutely incredible for it to be worth going to. Over time, it feels like Dallas is becoming more and more of a Region 9, kind of a regional show, and less of a national show. The first year I went, had a phenomenal time, bought tons of stuff from my home state that was down there. Couldn't believe it. Stuff I hadn't, ever seen at that point. And I think that's the last time I saw any good North Carolina stuff down there, was the first year I went, 5 or 6 years ago. And it seems like the number of dealers has declined. Now, part of that might be that the show's tables, I I don't think, unless it's a pre-NOAC show, which is kind of special, I don't think there's another show that comes close. They charge $80 for an 8-foot table. It's in a wonderful convention center. You can get there, shuttle from the hotel and everything. Those are all great things. But for most, I'd kind of say, newer people going to shows, or even, I mean, $80 for an 8-foot table is a lot, for unless you're going to be selling very high-end stuff. So anyways, and if you have any questions as I go through any of these, just let me know. South Carolina is a pretty good show. That's put on by Chris Jensen. It's kind of gone the same route, I would say, a little bit, in that it feels like the show's gone a little smaller. And I don't know if it's that it's getting really smaller. More of what I have with that show, as far as what I wish it'd be a little different, is there's a lot of tables. There's a whole lot of tables at the show that are filled with people's stuff. But generally, maybe 3 people, maybe 4 people will have a good chunk of the room between them. Obviously Chris puts on the show. He's a big dealer, so he's got usually one whole side of the room is his stuff. Matthew Delk, Jason Spangler are big collectors from the area, so they'll have a large amount of stuff. Personally, if there were 100 tables rented, I would rather it be 100 tables split with 2 tables a person, rather than having people have 5 or 10 tables. Now, that's assuming that they would all sell out, if you had people doing that. So I've gone off and on to South Carolina. It's really, to me, a South Carolina show. I mean, you would think North Carolina, there'd be North Carolina stuff down there. Not really from Eastern North Carolina, maybe a little bit from the western part of the state, but it's almost all South Carolina, even a little bit of Georgia. Now, the best show in the country, by far, well, we'll get into it a little bit. I would say it goes back and forth just for the sheer amount of stuff at a show. The best show in the country is hands down the Indianapolis show. To me, there's 2 shows that I have to go to every year, and it's Indianapolis and Camp Carpenter. So, I mean, right there, it's Indianapolis getting into February. They've changed location. It's a larger location. I like the location better. It's more rural. You're not right in Indianapolis. Sometimes the show changes location and you're like, oh man, why did they change? Honestly, I think the location's fine. It's great. I actually prefer it because it's easier to get in and out of, and you're not having to worry about being right in Indianapolis. It is an H-shaped building. So you have the left and the right side and a little area in the middle that has the bathrooms and stuff like that. So there's 2 sides of it. And they kind of let you pick your side when you're doing your table reservation. Personally, that's the only problem I have with the show, and there's nothing they can really do about that, because you work one side and you don't know what's going on the other side of the room. You have to walk back and forth a lot, and you feel like you're kind of missing half the show because half the show's in the other side of the building. It would be better to me if, as much as they could, if they kind of said, you have to fill up this side first and then we're going to fill up this side or something, just try to concentrate people a little more. I think letting people pick as they will is fine, but the problem is that it spreads people out and it's harder to, it's kind of just harder to see everything. But still, if you're ever going to go to a big show, that's the one to go to. It is not a show like Dallas with really high-end OA. There was a Matacam neckerchief there, so, there's good stuff floating around. I've seen Caldwell pins and some other things float around there. But it won't be, as much binder after binder of name and number key issues and that kind of thing. But there's going to be if you are a wide collector of scouting items, there will be things there for you. So then we get into some shows that I've never gone down to. I've heard about Florida. the problem with Florida is depending on where it is, it's a long way, and I've always kind of heard hit or miss things. That some years they're really good, some years they're not. Of course, all shows are like that to a degree. I can't really speak about Florida. Weatava, I've looked at flying in. I think that I just would love to fly in and do a show. But once again, you're looking for me to fly from North Carolina to there to do a show. It's probably over $1,000 cost, and it's just not worth it. It would be very hard for the show to be good enough to justify the cost for me to go. Virginia Beach, that's a great show. Now, there's something on here. There's 2 Virginia shows, and they're fairly close together. And I think, yeah. So this was a newer show, and it's the Peninsula show in May. Okay. It's right down the road, kind of ish, from the Virginia Beach show. Personally, to me, and this is just my opinion, you have a show in February, then you have Conclave in April, or I think their Conclave is in April, and then right after that you have the show in May. So I've heard a lot of people say that they're too close together, and it's almost mostly the same people that go to the show in February as the show in May. And from what I've heard, people just say that, you know, with them so close together, you've seen the same people not that long ago, and that's the only real detractor there. The Virginia Beach show used to be the Norfolk show. John Orts put it on for a long time. Used to be next to a very questionable bar. They've moved it to a church, which is a much nicer location. And it's had some of the same problems as many other shows, just getting a little smaller over the years. Especially when the Hannah-Bass brothers stopped. They used to get a lot of stuff, rent a lot of tables. But you could argue that for every show. You wish every show was bigger. So I haven't been to the Minnesota show. That'd be fun. Now this show is fun to go to, and I think that this is a really cool camp. Jay and Webster up in Connecticut. I really enjoy going to that show. I always find they usually have some great stuff in the silent auction. That's another thing, that if you're putting on a show, try to push to get donations and try to have some sort of silent auction or live auction. That can be a really big draw to the show, especially if you get very nice quality items. And they usually do have some very nice items available. They had some, I think it's Camp Quinnipiac, something like that. They had a pin and some early felt patches and some staff neckerchiefs. I mean, they had some great stuff that you don't, in my area, you don't normally find 1930s era camp items floating around in silent auctions at your local Trade-O-Ree. So it was really cool to see some of that stuff. I will also say they have to have the coolest camp fundraiser ever, because they make their own maple syrup and on camp and sell it as a fundraiser, which is just awesome. So I always buy some of that while I'm up there. And they also have charcuterie boards. They make those on camp and sell them with wood from the camp, which is really cool. So if you're on the East Coast, definitely a show to consider going to. I've never been to the Oklahoma show. You see some of these conflict with shows I go to. I've never been to the Kentucky show, but I have been to the Pittsburgh show. It's been hit or miss for me. I don't know that I've ever really had a phenomenal show there, because it's mostly Pennsylvania stuff. I mean, it really is a Western Pennsylvania show, not Eastern Pennsylvania. It's amazing how the state is so split on Western versus Eastern stuff at the shows. It's really a Western PA show. I've bought some interesting things there over time, but for me, going to PA up there, I do enjoy going up there. And if you're traveling with family, one thing to think about as you go to some of these shows is some of these cities are really nice to visit and spend some time in, which I've done. You can go into Pittsburgh, see the Andy Warhol Museum, see some of the sights and stuff, and kind of turn it into part of a larger trip, which to me makes some of these kind of questionable. Like, was it really worth it to spend 20 hours driving up here and back and going to and the hotel? Was that really worth it? Well, when you add that onto as part of a trip with the family, or maybe with your wife or whatever, that can swing it into, yeah, it was nice to go by the show as well as doing these other things. Never been to the Michigan show. This is one of the things that I'm going to kind of jump on and say I don't like. It is a one-day show. I will not drive. I don't care where it is. Unless, now I say that, of course, there's an exception if it's right around the corner. But I wouldn't drive to South Carolina, let alone New Jersey, for a one-day show. Every time I've ever gone to a one-day show, I have not enjoyed it. It just has never been a good experience. They're by the time you drive all the way in, you get there. A lot of times they're on Saturday, so you're either having to get in there, and if you drove a couple hours, you kind of want to get done, so you can go ahead and drive the couple hours back home. Or it's on Saturday, you have to drive in on Friday to go to the show. I've heard Allentown's good. That's the one show that I've heard that's a one-day show that's good, and I kind of regret I always seem to have a conflict with that on my calendar. That's probably the only one in the country that I would consider going to that's a one-day show. So I'm sorry, that's just my opinion. If you have a one-day show, you really should consider if you can somehow finagle to make it a 2-day show. I think you'll immediately get people who will consider going who would not otherwise consider going to the show. And most people I know that talk about going to a lot of shows, that's basically something similar that they say. This is a fun show. Let's see, March is, this is Madison. So there's 2 Wisconsin shows. And to me, they're very different. So this is the Madison Masonic Center. It's kind of interesting. So it's like right in downtown Madison. I almost got towed. Or ticket, I would have got a ticket and towed, really. So there's no street parking. There's really no parking until I think it's like after 5 o'clock on Friday. So it's just, most of the time when you go to shows, a lot of people would go regularly, they show up early. And no matter how early you say they can come, they'll usually show up earlier than that. And this is one of the shows where you really can't, because there's just no parking. There's no street parking because of how they do something with the snow and plows and how they go down certain streets. And anyway, so it's just, that's kind of that. And it seemed, the last time I went, it just didn't seem like it was quite as full of stuff as we were hoping it would be. There is another show that's coming up. It's the first weekend of November, and that is in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And personally, to me, of the 2, I think the one in Milwaukee's a much better experience if you want to go all the way to Wisconsin. It's just, there seem to be more people. They have a museum you can go through on site. It's in the bottom of the scout office. It's nice. It was easier to get in. The town was easier to drive through. I just really enjoyed Milwaukee a lot better than Madison. I had a good time the first year I went to Madison, but then when I went back, it just didn't seem to be as good. But a lot of times these shows kind of go back and forth over time. Never been to Nebraska. Me and John have talked about it, but that's a long way. Sometimes we think, well, yeah, that'd be great. And then we pull it up in the Google Maps and we go, wow, yeah, that'd be, 16 hours one way or something. And we're like, yeah, maybe, or 18 hours or more, and we're going, well, maybe not. I haven't gone to Missouri. This is the show that for whatever reason, every year I have a conflict. And like I said, this is probably the only that I would consider going to at this point ever, one-day show. And the only reason I would consider going to this one is put on, I think, by Scott Best. And I've just heard a lot of good things about it, that it's just a really good show. But I really, whenever I see this and it's a one-day show, I just look to the next one. Allentown's kind of the only exception to it. All the other ones are immediately off my radar. I don't even consider going to them. Crossroads of the West out in Utah. That was interesting. I drove out there, long way, North Carolina to Utah. That was a long way. I'm sure other people have driven farther at some point to go to a show, but was that 40 hours. I did not drive straight there either. I had several collections I went to see along the way. So I kind of drove zigzag to get there. It was very interesting because it was a one-day show disguised as a two-day show, I guess. It was interesting. So Friday night, it's in a canyon, which is probably the most interesting Trade-O-Ree site I've ever been to. It's like I guess it's a state park. It's right outside. I mean, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes maybe outside of Salt Lake City, which is not a small city. And it's just a canyon and woods and stream and snow everywhere. And you're driving through is really windy. And as someone who didn't know, I was looking for a scout camp, and there was like everyone and their brother was out there having a picnic. So I'm driving in the middle of the day because I assumed, like most shows, that if I showed up early, I'd be able to get in. And no, you can't. So I ended up sitting there for a couple hours waiting for them to open the camp. I assume they don't open it because the public is in there in the earlier part of the day and in the early afternoon. But anyway, there's no cell reception up there either, which was annoying. Friday night, everyone came in because it didn't open, the gates and stuff didn't open until 4 or 5 o'clock maybe. It was pretty late when everyone was really in and set up. A lot of people didn't show up until later to set up than I'm normally used to at shows. And then turn around, and Saturday is the auction day. So, you buy your tables, but it's really for just Friday, because on Saturday they take the whole room, or at least they did the year I went. They had over 1,000 lots of items. And they basically set up these big squares of 8-foot tables, and they ran one as silent auction, and then they ran the other as silent auction, and they went back and forth, kind of running them. And they ran through like 1,000 items. And then they had a live auction that took hours and hours. There was some really cool stuff. Most of it from out in that area. There wasn't anything, for the most part, that really jumped out at me, early insignia or something I was interested in. But there was a lot of Utah stuff. And I just couldn't believe they had that many lots that they ran through. I mean, they had to have run through far more than there are at Indy. And if you've been to Indy, there's a lot of lots that they run through their auction. But it was incredible. But it was a little weird, not really knowing what was going on and showing up, that it really was a Friday Trade-O-Ree, and then Saturday was the auction. And it took until early afternoon for them to run through everything. There was just so much. So then you have the Oregon show. I can't really speak to that. It's the same problem with the California ones. It's so far away. It's just hard for me to justify going. Here's one that would be interesting, the Pennsylvania one. I haven't been to that one. I've already talked about this. The Peninsula show. I think maybe I've been once. I think that's the one that Chip's Troop puts on. So I think I've been once. And it's just, I wish it was made. The problem is the fall is so full of dates already. I'm sure it would be very hard to fill it in somewhere. But I just wish it was spread out a little bit more from the Norfolk one. This one would be really cool to go to. I keep always saying I'm going to go one year. The Quimpanissa show, obviously, it's in Louisiana. And then you have the Alabama show the weekend after. My thought on what I would like to do is at some point, I would like to go down, do the Quimpanissa show, and then spend the week in New Orleans, and then come back, and as I come back, hit the Alabama show on the way back home. So that's what I'm kind of tossing around in my head as far as how I would like to do it. But those are two shows that I've been to the Alabama show, but I would like to do the Louisiana show as well. Haven't done California. It's just too far. Idaho, that one is just too far. The Alabama show is really good. It's just, I don't know, when I decided to go to it that I realized how far Alabama is. It's a long way from North Carolina. It was something like, was it 13 hours? I mean, it ended up being farther than I thought it would be. But it was a great show. There's a lot of really nice people down there that I had a great time. John Hall's great. I bought, a mix of stuff there, and I was overall, I was happy with everything I brought home. Roger Ward showed up with some nice OA stuff. It's hard to judge the show after only going to it one time, but I mean, I had a good time. If it was closer, I would certainly go to it more. And they have great barbecue down there. So, Allegheny Highlands, I haven't done that one or the Susquehanna. I don't think. I might have done this one. I think I maybe have done this one. I don't know. Some of them, they start, Williamsport. I'm pretty sure I've done this one. That name sounds familiar. Yeah, so if I remember right, and we will check, but I'm pretty sure if this is the one I'm thinking it is, it's in the middle of PA. And the problem, if this is where I'm thinking, is that it's in the middle of PA. Yeah, so it's kind of in the middle. I don't know how familiar people are with collecting. I don't know. Was that the one I went to? There's Pittsburgh. There's one show, and I can't quite remember if this is it or not. I went to one show. It was something that I think was new. And it was somewhere in the middle of Pennsylvania. And my thought was, I said, hey, this is going to be fantastic because you're going to get all the Western PA collectors and you're going to get all the Eastern PA collectors. And they're all going to come. And this show is going to be bigger because it's going to kind of bring them together because it's kind of in the middle between them. That did not happen at all. It was very, very small. I think there was the show that I went to, and I hate saying it because I just can't quite remember if this was the one or not, but if it is a middle PA show, I'd be nervous that this would be the same problem it would have. The one that I went to, I think that there was like maybe, other than me and Michael Lush who showed up, I think that there was maybe half a dozen or 8 vendors in there. It was in their dining hall. The Following Mormon, David D. Gazelle, Danny Lasquanos, and Muncher, they all showed up. But it was just one of those things of, I guess because it was in the middle of the state, the Western PA guys said, oh, that's not my thing. And the Eastern PA guys who are really, the Philadelphia guys, they were like, oh yeah, that's not my thing. And so it was very, very small. I'm not sure how it's kind of weird how they're so different. I mean, I guess we have the same thing in North Carolina. The Dixie guys in the western part of the state, they kind of do their own thing compared to us in the eastern part of the state. So, this one in Germany, obviously, I haven't decided to go to that. Michael goes to that one, I think, or he goes to one of them in Europe. Upstate New York, I have not gone to this one. I considered it. I have gone to, it's in the fall. Haven't been to either of these. Lone Star is in Austin. I've heard it's a pretty good show, but it's a very regional show for Texas stuff. I haven't done Nevada. Haven't done Sakima. Now this show, if you want to know how everything that could be added together to make a show just be perfect, this is the show. I'm not saying it's the best show in the country because it's just so hard to beat Indy and it's so hard to beat Carpenter. But they're such good shows just because of what kind of shows up in the room. But the Okanichi show, they just have the recipe of success. They have a large space on camp that they can have people. The people, that they can, they have plenty of table space. They have tables on site. They're not having to rent them, which the tables are 12-foot tables, which in the beginning when they started the show was 12 foot for $20. When they're that cheap, of course people are going to buy, if they were normally buy one table, maybe they buy 2. Because it was the value perspective to dealers was so good. They have cabins on site. The cabins are really nice, 4 bunks. They're air conditioned. I mean, $20 was what they were charging when they first started. So you're not having to pay for a lot of, you're not having to pay a huge number as far as a hotel rental. The tables are cheap. You're getting a lot of square footage for what you're, it was very, very successful. And I mean, it's just absolutely wonderful as far as how it's taken off. The one thing that I think they were having some trouble with, and I think they're probably still having a little trouble with, is that they're too successful. What does that mean? Well, the problem is I'm pretty sure they're almost sold out or sold out now. And the Trade-O-Ree was in this last August. So they're so successful that they could probably rent another chunk of tables if they just magically could expand the building, but they obviously can't. I mean, it's a very nice big space. I assume they are renting over 100 tables, but it can only be so big. And whenever I see a show rent out really quick, I have 2 thoughts in my mind. One, how many tables are they averaging per dealer? Because some shows they may rent out really quickly, but they're having every dealer get 5 or 6 tables. And in that case, what they need to do, if that's the situation you've run into, then you need to limit the amount of tables that people can get. And it needs to be something like, say, you can only get 3 tables, but we'll put you on a waiting list for more, because there are people who will not come to a show if they can't get tables. So you always want the most amount of people to have tables, even if they only have 1 table. That's fine. I'd rather have 100 different dealers show up, or 100 different collectors show up with 1 table, than a number of people show up and have a whole bunch of the same. So that's one thing. The other thing is that they're limited by their facility, and everything else is fine, and they just can't go to a bigger show. And you know what? That just happens. I mean, you can't build. These shows are good fundraisers, but they're not going to fund another $1 million to double the amount of space you have in your dining hall or whatever. So, this is an interesting show. Yeah, this is the one in Philadelphia. The old Philadelphia. It's moved around. I think at one time it was like in an armory or something, and it's moved, I think. I had a great time at the show. It was kind of like 2 rooms, but they were right next to each other, and it was more or less connected. You could walk between them, and they weren't so big you felt like you were missing a lot. I mean, space was fine. It was at a church. Parking was fine. Everything was good until we went to get food. And this is just kind of a funny thing to the show. Really nothing against it, in my opinion. I mean, I never felt unsafe, but it was funny because Mark Shaluti was there, and me and Ron asked Mark. We said, "Hey, we want to get something to eat. Where can we go to get something to eat?" And Mark turned around and looked at the guy who was the local who was running the show and asked him. He said, "Hey, where can they go get something to eat where they'll be safe?" And I don't know. It was interesting when someone turns it around to where can we get food to where can they get food and be safe. That you're sitting there going, wait a minute, what do I not know about this area? But really, overall, I mean, it was a nice show. There were people that it's just this thing with Eastern versus Western PA, where there were people at that show who I had never seen at the Pittsburgh show, and I did wonderful. Walking around, buying from them, talking to them. It was really nice. But it was, if I remember right, it wasn't like in Pennsylvania. It was kind of on the western outer bound of Pennsylvania. Of course, Pennsylvania is not a small city. I've never done Sagamore or this one. I wonder if this is the one that I had. It was before, yeah, okay. So the one I talked about a little bit earlier, talking about the middle of Pennsylvania, this was the show. And the reason I know it was the show is because I went to this show on my way up to going to this show. So this one from Sinoquipe, not Susquehanna, but from Sinoquipe. I think that's right. I think the other one was Susquehanna. Anyway, the Sinoquipe one was the one that it was very, very small, to put it nicely. I would imagine that they have the ability to be a great show. If they can pull in the people from the western part of the state and they can pull in some of the people from the eastern part of the state and get them at one show together, that would just be wonderful. The problem is that it just didn't happen. But it was the first year. So don't be too hard on them. It was the first year that I went. I'm pretty sure it was their first year. Having gone to Mississippi Valley, now this show was fun. Greater Niagara, it was more fun because we took it as a chance to go to Niagara Falls. So we went up. What we did for our trip is we went into Pennsylvania. We spent a week, and we went through all of kind of the Amish area and did, all the stuff you can do in there. Had the best ribs I've ever had in my life, by the way. But just had a great time. Lots of really good food. Then we went up to Niagara Falls. This show is really interesting. If you think about where early scouting is, a lot of early scouting was up in the Northeast. So walking around at the Buffalo show, there was some very early insignia items that you normally do not see ever at Southern shows, because just the stuff from the early teens wasn't down here for the most part. They didn't have the pins. They didn't have the patches. A lot of that stuff was up in the Northeast. So I enjoyed it from that perspective. There was someone selling a collection. They have a little local museum you can go to. It had some interesting stuff. But definitely, if you want to go to Niagara Falls, consider working it where you can go. This is about as late as I would want to go. Because the water was getting pretty cold up there, and I would not want to go any later to Niagara Falls. But we had a really, really good trip. Went on a tour bus thing and Lady of the Mist or something like that. On a side note, if I go again, what I'm probably going to do is I'm going to try to plan to spend a week up there fishing. Because I did not know until I got up there is that is the time of year that the salmon are in the streams in that part of the state. So that's the perfect time to go salmon fishing in the streams up there. So if you enjoy fishing and Trade-O-Rees, you may want to consider doing something along those lines. Haven't been to Idaho. Atlanta, the only problem I have with Atlanta is the tables are small and expensive. They're small. They're like little conference tables. They're not like an 8-foot table you would normally think of for a show. They're kind of like half as wide, and they're shorter, if I remember right. Maybe they're 6 foot. And if I remember right, they're kind of expensive. I've kind of stopped going to Atlanta. I really enjoyed it. I had a great time the 3 or 4 years I went. But it just kept getting smaller. They used to have more items donated that they auctioned off or they would have out there for you to sell. And that's a big draw to a show. If the people running the show will have items that have been donated that they'll auction or do something with, that will draw people in. Even if there's nothing phenomenal there, you'll at least go in and look, and because you want to rummage through. You're kind of curious what's there. And they had some good stuff mixed in too. But that's kind of, it dried up, and it felt like it was just all Atlanta stuff. Almost all Atlanta stuff, and then maybe a little bit of other Georgia stuff. Not a lot of South Carolina. They did get some of northern Florida there. Some of the stuff from northern Florida. So, if I was in Georgia or I was in northern Florida, I would go. But for me to go from North Carolina to there, I just started to go to other shows. I think this would be a fun show. I'd like to do this one. Just kind of get up. There's 1 or 2 other New York shows. New York, once again, it's some of these states. Western New York is completely different from New York City and even the area around New York City as far as who's the collectors. And it's very split. So I'd like to go to some of the other New York shows and kind of see some of the other parts of the state. I had a good time up there. Haven't been to Illinois. Haven't been to the Florida. Here's the Utah one. Yeah. Oh, this is the Utah one that I went to because it's the same weekend as Carpenter. So the year that I went was during all the COVID stuff, and Utah did not cancel the show, and Carpenter was canceled. But I think when we got the day of the show, when I showed up that Friday in Utah in Salt Lake City, they had announced that day some sort of that was like the first big thing they put out about that you were supposed to limit your gatherings of so many people. So I drove all the way out there, and I was kind of sitting there like, so does this mean the show's going to be canceled because of the thing that was done today, and it was the day of the show? And I talked to the organizer, and he was like, well, we're planning on being there. And I said, okay. But anyway, so here's Camp Carpenter. What a phenomenal show. And they have a phenomenal museum. The museum does sell some of the extra things that they get donated over the years, so sometimes there's some great things that have been donated. It's honestly, the museum is worth going to and checking out at some point if you've not been, because it's just that good. It's got stuff that you can go to. I mean, I've been to a number of museums, and I've never seen some of the stuff that's in that museum. I mean, it's really cool to see some of those different things. If I'm remembering right, they've got an American Boy Scout rifle with a bayonet, which is pretty cool. And I don't know, they've got a lot of stuff in there. They got a reverse civics on a uniform. I mean, and they have a very wide collection too, so lots of things to look at. But New Hampshire, I mean, every year it feels like good stuff comes in the room, and it's not one of those shows where everything is priced so high that it's the same stuff. People have been bringing it for 10 years, and it may be good stuff, but they're going to take it straight home. That's not New Hampshire. New Hampshire, stuff comes in, and people who bring it in, they're there to sell it, and there's a lot of good stuff that will change hands in the room over a weekend. Of course, there's New England stuff there. I mean, there's a good amount of New England stuff, but you also find just random older pieces. I don't know. I just, in my mind, Carpenter and Indy are the two shows that I have to go to in a year, and are my best national shows that I think of in my mind. This is the one that I like in Wisconsin, Milwaukee. That was really fun. And one thing I will mention as kind of a pro tip, I guess is how you would say it. When you go to all these shows, look for local scouting museums or council-based museums and see if you can visit them along the way. There's 2 different museums in Wisconsin that I visited on the last time I went to this one, and I had a great time at both of them, and it really was nice as far as part of the trip. It doesn't hurt that my neighbor's favorite beer is up there, and I bought a whole bunch of that back for him. So that was nice just in itself, and they have really nice aged cheese up there, though I could not believe how much some of it was. I mean, $50-$60 a pound. Couldn't believe it. But anyways, Milwaukee is definitely, if you go to a Wisconsin show, I think to me, that one was fantastic. Haven't been to California, Missouri. This is, once again, I look at it, it's a one-day show for New Jersey. I just move on. I don't even consider it. This is a newer show, and it's for National Capital Area. I've had a pretty good show there the last couple times. It feels like it's in Virginia, but it's kind of not Virginia. I mean, I don't know how to say that unless you kind of know. I mean, it is Virginia, but it's not. And you get people there that you definitely do not see down at the Norfolk show, or you don't see, down Virginia Beach in that area. It's just a kind of a different group of people. And it's a nice area. They've got a couple of nice breweries nearby. It was a nice drive-in, easy access to everything. They have a nice loading dock. You can slide stuff in. A good amount of people at the show. It was one of those shows where I got a table, I sold a little bit of stuff, I bought more stuff, and I went home happy. I mean, this one, Toledo, I've not done. So I can't really talk about Toledo. And then this is the Old Hickory. So here's the Old Hickory Trade-O-Ree. And then I'll get in on the 2024 calendar. I'll get in on the next one. So this is the last one, I guess, of the year. It's one I go to every time. Look, there I am. I'm standing right there on the picture. And there's Greg Grimes. And there's John Orr. So anyway, it's a really great show. I'm going to go, when I get there though, I'm going to tell Matt he's got to get it on the calendar earlier. I think this came on the calendar. Did it come on the calendar in the last month? I don't know. I just learned about it as far as it showing up on the calendar. It feels like they've gotten to where every year they post it closer and closer to the date they post it. Now, some of that I know was they were having problems during COVID getting the church to agree to a specific weekend in advance, far in advance. When you do a Trade-O-Ree, I'm telling you, I guess I can say 6 months, but really you need to have it on the calendar almost at the start of the year, or as soon as one's done, get it on the calendar for the next year. It needs to be up there so people can plan around it. Especially, me, I go to 12 shows, 15 shows in a year. I plan my calendar a year out. So when you don't put your Trade-O-Ree on the calendar until November and it's in December, kind of hard to do that. Or, well, it's not that bad this year. I think it was last year they did that. I don't know. Please put it on the calendar as soon as possible.